I don't just want to be in the race for clean energy. I want us to win the race.
Net zero. Oh my God, isn't it awful? Tell you what, we're not even a part of it. Look at the numbers.
Net zero, you know what net zero, they have no idea what it means, by the way. It's net zero. What does that mean? Nobody knows.
Climate change has become a climate crisis, and a threat has now become a reality.
Zero carbon.
East Talk.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbon Easter, Series 6, The Cow in the Room. I'm Ian Collins, and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. If it's green, it's in, Dale. And I think we should start. And I reckon we should get a jingle for this. Like, what have you been up to this week, Dale? And then the crowd can go, ooh, like a kind of quiz show from the 90s.
Yeah, or the noughties, or even the right now. I mean, they have jingles, don't they? Quiz shows.
They love a whoop.
Jingle jangle. Yeah. Well, what have I been up to?
That.
Mostly, certainly, last couple of days, been on the radio. Talk sport, actually. I was in the building for a couple hours yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, we missed each other. So we must have been like 18 meters away.
Or 18 floors. It's a big place.
Or 18 floors, yeah. It is a big place. I'm behind a wall, so I would have been...
Oh, they put you in a cupboard.
That's right. They only let me in a cupboard. But you were on with Simon Jordan, a man with a football background, of course, in ownership.
Yeah, he doesn't mention it very often, but he was once.
No, never comes up that.
Never. I'm not going to mention it again here then, because we've all heard it.
Yeah,
I was in the building on a podcast first, alongside a lawyer. We made for an interesting contrast, I would say, because he was quite, sane's not the right word, because I'm sane, but he was like calm, kind of spoke with no excitement. And slowly, a bit like I am now. And the topic was football for one whole hour. And it began with the recent ruling between the Premier League and Man City, actually, about player transfers, which sounds all kinds of dry. But I managed to make it fun by calling Manchester City, Newcastle, and that Jim Ratcliffe bloke who partly owns Manchester United. I called them all climate criminals.
Did you?
Yeah, and I explained.
Well, what have they done to you, Dale Vince? Come on.
I explained ever so briefly.
They speak very well of you.
They made tons of money making the planet uninhabitable. You know, I was complaining really about sport washing of petro states and petro blokes like the Ineos man, who's also a tax exile. I had to lob that in as well. Apparently, the producer told me afterwards he was furiously typing as I was speaking to check it was true. He was fact checking me. He's like, "Oh, that's okay. He is a tax exile. That's okay."
Yeah, they do. That's why they have nappies next to producers' chairs.
Yeah. So, and then while I was there, the Talk Sport dudes were like, "Just seen you in the building. Come up and see us." So I popped out and seen my old mate Jim White. And
Jim is a lovely guy, isn't he?
He
Jim
is
the nicest.
He
man.
is, yeah. And this is off the what they wanted to talk about was Chris Boardman this week came out and he gave a speech at a conference about the Premier League and how they needed to do more. He was berating them for flying across the Atlantic for friendlies, and in one case, flying to Australia for a fucking friendly is incredible. 3 days before the season started or ended, I forget which. I didn't really care, you know. So we had a little chat about that, and I pointed out that, you know, obviously it's wrong. But he said to me, like, would it make a difference if they all stopped? I said, well, it wouldn't, not to the climate crisis, but it would to the comms crisis, and by which I meant, I explained. Like, people still deny the climate crisis is a thing.
Yep.
Other people deny that it's man-made, and other people deny that we can do anything about it as individuals, right? And all of that is wrong, and it dilutes and obfuscates and stuff like that. So I said, but if Premier League football teams actually set a better example, it would make a huge difference on the comms issue. Our old friend Simon Jordan, that's it. He went, yeah, but China. and I thought, well, okay.
Yeah, it's one for you, Dale, right? You ain't thought about this one before, have you? I'm going to throw a right old curveball at you. Yeah, what are you going to say to this then, big fella? China!
And it was a different version. Normally it's like, why should we bother if China exists in the world or something like that? And instead it was like, but we've exported all of our jobs and industry to China just to claim we've got a smaller footprint. I was like, okay, that's novel at least.
There you go.
But I let it go and talked about something more important.
So you were in the building and then they grabbed you for that as a kind of like, wow, Dale's in the building, let's get him on.
Yeah, I was like an honoured guest.
Yeah, well, I like that because a similar thing happened to me today on the radio that I was on air and somebody said, Robert Jenrick's in the building and doing something on like floor 2 or something. Let's grab him and get him on. And so within like 5 minutes of me doing a debate on workers' rights, suddenly I've got potentially the next leader of the Tory party sitting in front of me with no preparation to do this here. So we didn't know it was going to happen. And I found, and you know this, Dale, that when you meet politicians one-to-one, whether they are your flavour of politics or not, they're nearly always kind of like, oh, actually, they're all right. They're quite a nice person.
Yeah.
And, very polite, very, but of course he's one of the two that's going to become the next leader. Do you think either of those, it's him or Kemi Badenoch, do either of those pose a threat I'm even laughing at the question. Do either of those pose a threat to Keir Starmer?
It is a funny question. First I was going to say Robert Who, all right? I'm not sure I've heard of him, but yeah, you're right. And then you say one of the two that are going to become leader, and I think, what, they're going to be like the Green Party and have co-leaders? But no.
See, they've not thought about that.
They should have done that. One woman, one guy, one black, one white. It would have been the perfect combo.
Everything is
all
there.
Bases covered, right?
All bases covered.
Anyway, the answer is no, because I think Bad Enough is going to win. Probably, and she's probably bad enough to keep the Tories out of power for quite a while, I reckon. Although, I mean, other people say, and I think it's a valid point, will she even be leader by the time in the next election? Because the Tories, I mean, it's like a permanent Game of Thrones thing going on, isn't it? Do they not choose a new leader every year or something like that?
I think it's in the Tory Bible. Thou shalt proclaim a new leader every year. But you're right, because that's happened before, hasn't it? Yeah. So they'll get
again and again
about halfway through this parliament, and they'll go, "This isn't really working."
Regicide is in their DNA.
Hey, great! You invoked the regicide word. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Well, we'll watch with interest, and of course, over the years, they're going to give us a lot of material anyway, Dale. So.
Oh, absolutely! I mean, starting anytime soon.
Yeah, probably now. Should we talk about hurricanes? Florida getting battered by Hurricane Milton, which is the latest. Not the worst hurricane they've had. It's not even the worst hurricane that America have had this year. But nonetheless, I mean, you want to talk about inclement weather. I think, all fingers point to Florida right now.
But it looked like it was going to be the worst in 100 years. And I think the winds dropped off suddenly from a force 5. It dropped to a force 3 overnight or something like that. 3 million homes without power, though, is quite a big deal. Just a few hundred homes destroyed when it looked like the whole state might have been flattened. So so that's decent, I would say, a decent outcome. But news attached to that says that global heating makes hurricanes like this one twice as likely as they were before. You got to think, well, I mean, firstly, that's quite obvious that the climate crisis is driving this. The ocean temperature had risen 10% in recent years, and it's ocean temperature that drives the ferocity of storms. So there you have it.
There you go. I mean, there is an argument, of course, that, bad weather happens anyway. I had a guy called, do you remember John Ketley, the weatherman?
No.
Yeah, he speaks well of you, Dale.
Sorry, John.
He was another person that was in the building. I think he only came in to pick up a mug, and we grabbed him as well because he knows like weather stuff. And we were having that conversation about weather. Obviously, hurricanes, bad weather, storms will always happen. But this bit of news that we're just imparting there is that it's twice as likely given the current conditions of the planet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's what we hear from the right wing of life, and your Julia Hartley Brewers and your Mike Grahams. Yeah, we've always had bad weather, blah blah blah. But all of the data shows that we're having bigger, badder weather more frequently: floods, droughts, wildfires, hurricanes. You know what I mean? You can't argue with the data, even though they will. But you can't actually. Only a fool would argue with the data.
Here's a question from Tara. A few weeks ago, you talked about the organisers of the Ford Festival and why they didn't take your grid fairy batteries after the massive attack gig on the Downs. Can you explain more on what you meant by that?
I mean, the batteries were there. They just powered the massive attack gig, and the Ford Festival came the following weekend, I think it was. It's a great festival. We were quite keen for them to have the batteries as well. Our conversations were with the promoter. They were, pretty commercially focused, and they were like, I don't know. They had generators already on site because we had to hide them in case people think that we had them. we put screens around them. So I think they'd already made their decision for generators. But as a result, actually, of talking about this on my podcast, the Ford Festival peeps reached out and keen to do something next year. There was a fear or a doubt that actually the batteries would work. Yeah. So what we're hearing now is that now that we've proved they do work, they're interested, which is, the way it goes. I think I said, a couple of weeks ago, is new tech. It does have to prove itself. But here we go. It should be a very busy summer. We're looking to buy a second battery actually at the moment because we've inquiries coming out of our ears and other orifice right now for batteries.
Is that actually the plural?
I think it must be, surely. Can't be orifices, can it? I made that sound worse, but it can't be orifices. Maybe it is. I like orifice. Orifice
we all know what you mean.
It's way more elegant, right?
I think so. This is from Chris on X, who says, "Thank you for uncovering what happened at Whiteshore Cockles. Surely those involved must be investigated, as the regulators have done nothing."
Yeah, look, pleasure, Chris. And this Whiteshore Cockles thing, I was laughing to myself earlier today because we were making another video about it and we've been doing social media posts. And I think it's a really confusing name. It's a name of a business. It sounds like a name of a place and a creature, maybe a creature from a certain place, but it's none of those things. It's actually, there are some creatures that run a company at that place that have been doing these bad things with diseased salmon bodies, To the question, we've reported it to the police as a first step. It is a criminal act, and we hope, that's been picked up by the cops, so we'll see where they go with that. Yeah, regulators next, and Scottish government really they've got something to answer here.
Let's go back to China then, Dale, because China are going to head a green energy boom over the next round about half a decade, about 6 years. 60% of new projects are going to have a green foundation to them, it seems. So again, it just goes back to that, the curveball, get out of jail card that gets thrown at you all the time. What about China?
Yeah, and I think we need to co-opt it right now and make it ours, and something that we get on the front foot and say, what about China, guys, right? Because more than half of the world's renewable energy in the next 5 years is going to be built by China. Well, that ought to put us to shame, really, especially our right-wing friends that bleat all of the time about China and how they're not doing enough. They're doing more than the rest of the world put together.
Have we got the capability to do more, or do we just now rely on China? Because, when it comes to building solar panels, they are the chief manufacturers of that, globally speaking. Is the rest of the world just going, well, just let China do it because we can't catch up?
Knows. I don't know what the rest of the world thinks. Collectively, the rest of the world doesn't think, does it? It's every nation acting slightly individually. But China does make most of this stuff. That's a fact, like 80% of the world's solar and stuff like that. But they seem to have a bottomless capacity in terms of manufacturing ability. So, if we all upped our game and just did more, and we could, then they would make more. So really, the answer to your question is we could absolutely do more.
One from Julie says, "Thank you for discussing my cow in the room with Defra on a recent episode." Oh, that's right. This was Julie who had gone to a meeting, hadn't she?
Yes.
Why are there no documentaries on TV explaining the cow in the room? Maybe your new book could be the basis for one.
Yeah, interesting idea. And we're kind of looking at a film ourselves, actually, that might morph into the cow in the room. But interesting idea.
From Chev, who says, "Any news on the launch of EcoJet?"
No. Sorry, I was momentarily stunned by my own thought process, but I'm not going to share it. So, news on the launch of EcoJet.
So that can't be. I'm sorry, I can't let that one slide, Dale, without a little bit of probing. Is this something not for broadcast?
It was just silly.
Is it just like one of those random daft thoughts that we all have in our head from time to time and go, that doesn't translate beyond my head?
It was just silly. You said the name and I thought, oh, we're in X-rated corner already. Not because it means anything, Chev, but it was just so unusual compared to Chris and Julie and Helen. It was all very unusual. Absolutely. And then I stopped myself.
Well, we're about to get to X-rated corner.
I can't wait.
So EcoJet, for those who don't know, explain EcoJet, what it's all about and what stage you're at.
Yeah, so it's a zero carbon airline, world's first. We launched about a year ago. When I say launched, I mean we kind of formed the company, began the process of getting slots for landing and takeoff at different airports in Britain.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the technology is going through testing. It's in the air, literally. It's being flown. It's going through CAA approval and all of that kind of stuff. We've got leasing companies lined up to give us planes. We've done all of that now. We've got to raise a bit more money, quite a bit more money actually, to get it in the sky now, and that's our last big challenge. I think we're hoping to make some progress on that first quarter next year, be in the skies next year, with a big ta-da moment. And this comes up all the time. I was on Sport Talk talking about flying, as I mentioned earlier, and it's like, for me, flying is like the last frontier in terms of our imagination and this really important message that we need to convey to people, that we haven't got to give everything up to get to net zero, not even flying. So I can't wait until we can demonstrate that.
So that will, in the coming years, is that the kind of time frame you would have to realistically put on it?
Yeah, we should be flying next year to begin with existing planes with existing engines running on kerosene. And then within a year of that, we expect the technology to come through the extensive CAA testing. And the beauty, one of the beauties of this idea is that then we just swap out the engines. So we don't build a new airplane. We use an existing stuff. It's a kind of reuse thing, which is, well, from an environmental point of view, is quite wonderful. If we can convert existing airplanes to be zero carbon, well, it's a good thing.
So when you and I want to book that Beano to Benidorm and just sort of jump on an eco jet, when can we see that?
I'm going to say 3 years, but what's a Beano, by the way?
I don't know. I just
okay.
I always hear people say it like a trip, you know. We're having a Beano to Blackpool or Benidorm. It doesn't always have to begin with B, because otherwise it would be Basingstoke as well. And no one ever had a Beano to Basingstoke, to my knowledge. Helen says, would you still accept a peerage after all the noise in the right-wing media this week?
Oh, I'm so fed up with that story, that noise.
Yep.
You know, it's like even having to answer those questions, not yours, Helen, I don't mean that, but those questions in the media, it kind of offends me. It's like when somebody accuses you of being racist, because in my case, I flew a Palestinian flag, and you have to defend yourself and you say it's not racist to stand up for the Palestinian people. Just to even be in that conversation to say it's not racist, I'm not racist, is kind of, it feels wrong, you know. And I'm in the same situation here. Look, you know, I didn't give money for a peerage or knighthood or whatever they're talking about this week, and that's not what I want, and that's not what I'm expecting. My ex popped up and just like crazily said she expects something's coming in the new year, and she wants to delay the final divorce between us. We separated nearly 4 years ago. She wants to delay that for a few months because she wants to be called a lady. And I just think that's so gross and irritating to drag my name through all of that kind of mud.
Yeah.
I'm already fed up talking about it.
Such a weird thing. You'll always be a Viscount to me, as far as
well, that sounds all right.
Viscount Vince. I mean,
okay, alliteration, right? That's what it is.
I didn't think that when I said it, but that kind of works, doesn't it?
I tell you what, somebody said to me this week. I was at the BBC Sport Awards on Monday, and somebody said to me, "You're the Che Guevara of the environment."
Oh, that's all right. You take that, wouldn't you?
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Well, can I bring you to some people who might disagree with that?
No, not the people with the funny names.
Yeah, it's time for X-Rated Corner. Here comes one from. I'm always. There's a certain pattern. You know, the other day we established that when people write weird, extreme stuff, they normally have lots of numbers after their name. Like,
after their weird name.
71296438. You think, right, okay. Or they go down this route, truthsayer. So truthsayer, which usually means they are anything but.
He's also GB57, and I think quite literally he was born in Britain in 1957.
I think that's probably what's happened here. That's our investigative endeavours. We've identified his year of birth and the fact that he wouldn't know the truth if he jumped out of a black cab with a name badge on. Anyway, truthsayer says, Vince, Vorderman, Lineker, Packham are shaping a shadowy, woke new mafia cabal that will rival Soros and Gates in social change. We must rebel.
Well, I love that. I mean, it's all kinds of like amusing and fun. And I just want to say, Soros and Gates, quake in your boots, boys, because we're coming for you.
There it is. This one from Partha Burt, who says, we don't need another world war to destroy us, just Miliband and Vince.
But wait, this is Partha Burt 2. There must be a Partha Burt 1 somewhere, for f***'s sake.
That's true. Where is part 1 or Partha 1? I don't know. One Mick says, shit, I'm agreeing with Dale Vince. What's up with me? There you go.
I love it.
See, that's a great example of evolution, isn't it? We've only done the X-Rated Corner feature for like 4 weeks, and straight away people are coming round.
They are coming round. They're coming out of their right-wing days.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I love that one. It's just like it's super. Thank you, One Mick UK.
There it is.
I nearly read his name as One Mick UK ship, but that's the first line of his comment.
Well, that could be, I mean, bearing in mind some of the names we've had on this feature, that would be quite easy.
It could have been.
The fact that somebody is, I don't know, Face 89. There's no reason why we won't have one of those.
No, that had to be Face 69. Come on.
Indeed. That's a very good point. Dazzling Doubter says, remove all the climate nutcases from the UK with immediate effect, including Dale Vince and that Jim Dale weather bloke. We need to live life properly again, eat meat, drive fuel-powered cars, enjoy our right to coal, have a log fire whenever we want. I love CO2s, says Dazzling Doubter.
I think our listeners are trolling us here, or trolling the doubters here. I mean, you couldn't make that one up, could you? Come on. No. Surely he's more self-aware than that.
You'd think so. Just before we finish, Dale, what are you up to this week?
Well, I'm off to the Cheltenham Literature Festival on Saturday after football, of course. We're in the FA Cup, Forest Green, in our first round of it. And then off to Cheltenham to talk, I think, probably about the Cow in the Room. Anyway, it's a literature festival, so I guess it's going to be about books.
Good work. Well, you can still talk about the Cow in the Room.
Well, it's going to be a book, so that it makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, don't you go to a literary festival when you've written the book?
I don't know. I've never done it.
That's right. Tell us about your book.
I'm going to find out.
It's not written yet, but it'll make a crack in half an hour. We get a lot of material out of it.
I say I'm looking for a publisher. Anybody out there in the audience?
Listen, Dale, we will speak in a week.
Nice.
Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast from your podcast provider. Then you get each new episode automatically. Follow Dale on social media, x.com/DaleVince, off facebook.com/DaleVince, and you didn't know this, TikTok too.
Yeah, TikTok too. And actually, I'm getting a little bit active on TikTok. I've got a new social media team, fresh from fighting the election, some of these guys, and they're here to amp up my social media presence. So I'm looking forward to some of that in the coming months.
Indeed.
Zero carbon
east of